The lights flickered again inside the command center of station. Commander watched the holographic map with tired eyes. Red dots covered the screen like a disease. Each dot was an enemy soldier. There were thousands of them surrounding the station. 11 days. They had been under attack for 11 days. Was 34 years old, but she felt much older now. Her black hair was tied back in a messy knot. Dark circles had formed under her eyes. She had not slept properly in over a week. None of them had. "Report," she said, her voice calm but heavy with exhaustion. Lieutenant stepped forward. He was a young man, barely 26, but the siege had aged him too. His hand shook slightly as he held his. "We have 412 defenders left, Commander. Mixed species. The lost 60 soldiers defending the eastern corridor yesterday." He paused and swallowed hard. They held their position for 9 hours against enemy assault troops. Closed her eyes for a moment. There were small, gentle beings covered in soft silver fur. They were scholars and healers by nature. They had never been fighters. But when the attack came, they had picked up weapons and stood beside everyone else. 60 of them had died holding a single corridor. Around her, the command center was filled with aliens from many different worlds. They stood in one corner. They were insect-like creatures with hard shells and many legs. Their mandibles clicked nervously as they watched the holographic map. Near them were the tall and thin beings with skin that glowed softly with blue light. That glow was dim now, a sign of their fear and exhaustion. The largest beings in the room were They looked like statues made of living stone, with rough gray skin and bodies built like mountains. Even they seemed uneasy. Their commander, a massive creature named, stood with his arms crossed, watching with deep-set eyes. The shield generators said, "How much time do we have?" The station's chief engineer looked up from her console. She was human-like, one of only 37 humans on the entire station. Her face was smeared with grease, and her fingers were burned from working on broken equipment. 6 hours, said quietly, maybe 7 if we get lucky. After that, the shields will fall. Nobody spoke. Everyone knew what would happen next. The Dominion did not take prisoners. They had attacked without warning, without reason, and without mercy. When the shields fell, they would storm the station and kill everyone inside. Looked at the faces around her. Humans and others. They had all come to this station from different worlds, speaking different languages, with different customs and beliefs. Now they were all going to die together. "Has Earth responded to our distress signal?" she asked. Shook his head slowly. "Earth's nearest fleet is 18 days away, Commander. Even their fastest ships could not reach us in time. I am sorry." Nodded. She had expected that answer. She had sent the message anyway, hoping for a miracle. But miracles were rare in war. "Then we fight," she said simply. "We hold as long as we can. We make them pay for every corridor, every room, every inch of this station." The aliens in the room straightened slightly. Even facing death, her words gave them something to hold on to. The commander uncrossed his arms and nodded with respect. "We will stand with you, Commander," he said, his voice like stones grinding together. "To the end." Suddenly, the communication console screamed with static. Everyone jumped at the harsh sound. Rushed to the controls, her fingers flying across the buttons. "What is that?" asked, stepping closer. His eyes went wide. Her hands stopped moving. For a long moment, she just stared at the screen. "Commander," she said, her voice strange. "This is not interference. This is a compression burst. Military-grade encryption from Earth." The room went silent, the stopped clicking. The skin flickered brighter, even leaned forward. "That is impossible," said one of the diplomats. "Human space is 18 days away. No message could." "It is not a message," interrupted. She looked up at, and for the first time in 11 days, there was something in her eyes that had not been there before. Hope. "It is a response to our distress signal." She pressed a button and a voice filled the command center. It was human, male, calm, and professional. "Station, this is Earth Command. Your signal has been received. Hold your position, do not surrender. Shock troops are inbound. Estimated arrival time 4 hours. Repeat 4 hours. Hold the line, help is coming." The message ended. The static faded to silence. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Then the diplomat made a sound of confusion. 4 hours, that is impossible, human space is. 18 days away, yes, said. She was smiling now, a strange and almost frightening smile. For normal ships, for the normal fleet. "What do you mean?" Delegate Myra, the eldest of the, stepped forward. Her glowing skin pulsed with curiosity and confusion. "What are shock troops?" Looked back at her, and something passed between them. An understanding, a memory, a fear. "When humanity joined the Galactic Coalition," said slowly, "we shared most of our military technology, our ships, our weapons, our tactics. We wanted to be good partners. We wanted to show that humans could be trusted." She paused and took a deep breath. "But we did not share everything. There were some things that the Coalition considered too extreme, too dangerous, too human." "The shock troops," said slowly. "I have heard stories, whispers. I thought they were myths." "They are not myths," said. "They are the most dangerous soldiers humanity has ever created. They exist for one purpose, to break sieges, to turn impossible battles into victories." She looked around the room at all the alien faces staring at her. "They think they have us trapped. They think this battle is already won." She smiled, and there was something cold in that smile. "They are about to learn how wrong they are." Outside the station, the army prepared for their final assault. Their commander, a tall and cruel being named, stood in his mobile command center and studied the reports. His officers had detected something strange, an anomaly in space, moving far too fast to be any known ship. "It is a sensor ghost," one of his officers said, "nothing more." Nodded and turned away. He had 12,000 soldiers, 3 battle groups, and total control of the space around station. Nothing could possibly save the defenders now. He was wrong, and in 4 hours he would understand just how wrong. High above the planet, space itself seemed to bend and twist. Something was coming. Something that traveled between stars in hours instead of weeks. Something that had been built for moments exactly like this. Earth's shock troops were on their way. And when they arrived, everything would change. The news spread through station like fire through dry grass. Within minutes, everyone knew. Help was coming. Earth had answered. But not everyone was comforted by this news. Many of the aliens had never heard of shock troops before. Those who had heard stories were not sure if they should feel relieved or more afraid. Commander stood in the medical bay, helping the healers tend to the wounded. The small silver-furred beings worked with gentle hands, treating burns and bandaging wounds. They said little, but their large dark eyes showed their grief. So many of their people had died in the fighting. Delegate Myra found there. The elder moved slowly through the rows of injured soldiers, her glowing skin casting soft blue light on their faces. When she reached, she stopped and folded her long, thin hands together. "Commander, I must ask you something," Myra said. Her voice was musical, like wind through crystal chimes. "My people can feel emotions. It is part of how we communicate. Since that message arrived, the humans on this station have changed." "Changed how?" asked, though she already knew the answer. "Before, I felt fear from your people. Fear, determination, acceptance of death. These are emotions I understood." Myra paused, her skin flickering with uncertainty. "Now I feel something different, something I do not have a word for. It is like anticipation, but darker, fiercer." Set down the bandages she was holding. She looked at them for a long moment. "You are feeling hope," she said. "Human hope, it is not a gentle thing." "That is not hope as my people know it," Myra said quietly. "Hope is soft. This feels like hunger." Did not disagree. In another part of the station, the commander had gathered a small group around him. Several diplomats stood nearby, their antennae twitching with curiosity. A few human soldiers had joined them, including warrant officer, a gray-haired man with a face and steady hands. "Tell us about these shock troops," said. His voice was low like stones rolling down a mountain. "I have heard rumors, tales, but I want truth." Nodded slowly. He pulled up a chair and sat down, moving like a man carrying a heavy weight. "My grandfather served with them," he said. 50 years ago, during the rebellion, a group of colonists took over a planet and declared independence. They had 10,000 armed fighters dug into the capital city, fortified positions, underground bunkers, defense turrets on every building. "A siege situation," observed. "Yes, the regular military estimated it would take 6 months to capture the city, maybe longer, thousands of casualties on both sides." Paused and looked down at his hands. "Earth Command sent in the shock troops instead." "How many?" one of the asked. 200. The aliens exchanged confused looks. 200 soldiers against 10,000. That was not a battle. That was suicide. "What happened?" asked. "They dropped from orbit," said. "Came down through the atmosphere in pods designed to hit the ground at speeds that would kill anything else. They landed in the middle of the enemy positions. My grandfather said the sky turned red with fire and then—" He stopped and shook his head. "The siege lasted 11 minutes. Silence fell over the group. They clicked their mandibles nervously. Stone Face showed no expression, but his eyes had narrowed. 11 minutes, he repeated, against 10,000 soldiers. "The shock troops are not normal soldiers," explained. "They are modified, enhanced. Their bodies are stronger, faster, more durable than regular humans. Their armor is the most advanced technology we have, but the most dangerous thing about them is their minds." "Their minds." Myra had joined the group, drawn by the conversation. "They are linked," said. "Neural connections allow them to share thoughts, sensations, tactical data. When they fight, they do not fight as individuals. They fight as one organism with many bodies. One shock trooper sees something and instantly all of them know. One has an idea and instantly all of them act on it." The diplomat made a sound of discomfort. "This sounds disturbing, unnatural." "It is," agreed. "That is why the coalition rejected the technology. They said it was too extreme, too dangerous." He smiled, but there was no humor in it. They were right. Shock troops are the most dangerous soldiers in the galaxy, and in about 3 hours, 12,000 are going to find out exactly how dangerous. Meanwhile, in orbit, the commander was growing annoyed. His sensor officers kept reporting strange readings, energy signatures that appeared and disappeared, gravitational distortions in nearby space, anomalies that made no sense. "It is interference from the local star," one officer suggested. "It is debris from our orbital bombardment," said another. Dismiss them both. He was focused on the assault. The station's shields would fail soon. When they did, his troops would storm inside and kill everyone. The coalition would learn the price of resisting the Dominion. He never once considered that help might actually be coming. After all, the nearest coalition fleet was 18 days away. Even if they had started moving the moment the distress signal was sent, they would arrive far too late. What did not understand was that Earth had prepared for exactly this kind of situation. For centuries, humans had fought each other. They had learned hard lessons about war, about siege, about rescue. They had built weapons and soldiers designed to do the impossible. The shock troops were not coming from the nearest fleet. They were coming from a ship that did not officially exist, using technology that the coalition did not know about, traveling through space in ways that should not have been possible. And they were very, very close now. Back on the station was working frantically at her console. She had detected something, a faint signal hidden in the background noise of space. It was getting stronger. "Commander," she called out, I have contact. Rushed to her side. On the screen, a single dot had appeared at the edge of the system. It was moving at impossible speed, crossing distance that should have taken hours in mere minutes. One ship said, just one. One ship is all they need, replied. That is the Hammer of Soul. It is a shock trooper carrier. One ship against 3 battle groups. Looked up at her commander with an expression that was hard to read. There was excitement there, but also something else. Something that might have been pity for the who did not yet know what was coming for them. Commander, she said quietly, you have seen what regular human soldiers can do. You have served beside them, fought beside them. You know how we think, how we adapt, how we refuse to give up. Nodded. The shock troops are not regular soldiers. They are what happens when you take everything that makes humans dangerous and multiply it by 100. Turned back to her console. One ship against 3 battle groups is not a fair fight. They should have brought more ships. Outside, the Hammer of Soul screamed toward station. Inside its hull, 300 soldiers in black armor checked their weapons and prepared to drop. They knew the odds. They knew the numbers. They did not care. They were shock troops. They had a job to do. And in less than an hour, they would remind the galaxy why humanity was feared. The Hammer of Soul tore out of faster-than-light travel like a blade cutting through silk. One moment there was empty space. The next moment there was a warship, black and angular, covered in weapons that gleamed under the distant starlight. Inside the ship, alarms were not ringing. There was no panic, no shouting, no chaos. There was only silence and the hum of machinery as 300 soldiers prepared for war. Major stood at the front of the drop bay. He was 47 years old, with a face carved by years of combat and eyes that had seen too much death. His black-powered armor made him look like a giant, nearly 3 meters tall, with weapons built into every surface. Around him stood his soldiers, men and women from every part of Earth, united by training, purpose, and the neural link that connected their minds. They moved in perfect synchronization, checking weapons and sealing armor without speaking a single word. They did not need words. Through the link, they shared thoughts faster than speech could travel. "Listen up," said. His voice carried through the bay and through the neural network simultaneously. 400 friendlies on that station below, mixed species, and about 40 humans. They have been holding out for 11 days against impossible odds. Private stood near the back of the formation. She was 22 years old, the youngest soldier in the unit. Her armor was newer than the others, her weapons not yet scratched by battle, but her eyes were steady and her hands did not shake. Through the neural link, she could feel the emotions of her fellow soldiers. There was no fear. There was focus, determination, and something that outsiders might have called bloodlust but was actually much simpler than that. It was purpose. They knew exactly why they existed and what they were meant to do. They have approximately 12,000 ground troops surrounding the station, continued. 3 battle groups in orbit. The station's shields will fail in approximately 2 hours. Someone in the back made a sound that might have been a laugh. 12,000 enemies, 3 battle groups. For anyone else, those numbers would have been terrifying. For shock troops, they were just numbers. Rules of engagement, said. Coalition Standard with Earth Contingency Protocol 7. A ripple of dark satisfaction passed through the neural link. Protocol 7. That meant no restrictions on psychological warfare. They were not just allowed to be terrifying. They were encouraged to be. Sir, Sergeant said. He was a veteran of 15 drops, with scars hidden beneath his armor and memories that would have broken lesser men. What about the orbital groups? Do we engage? The Hammer will handle the ships, replied. Our job is the ground. We drop, we break their lines, we relieve the station. Standard siege breaker protocol. Nodded and closed his visor. Around him, 300 soldiers did the same. The drop bay was now filled with identical figures in black armor, each one a weapon designed to end wars. "Drop pods are ready," the ship's AI announced. Its voice was calm and mechanical. "Atmospheric entry in 4 minutes. All personnel prepare for deployment." Walk to her pod. It was a small capsule, barely large enough for one armored soldier, designed to survive the violence of atmospheric entry. She climbed inside and felt the restraints lock around her. The pod sealed with a hiss of pressure equalization. Through the neural link, she could feel her doing the same. 300 minds connected, prepared, united. She had never felt alone since joining the shock troops. She never would again. "One last thing," his voice came through the link. "The on that station held the Eastern Corridor for 3 days. Scholars and healers picking up weapons and fighting so others could survive. 60 of them died." Felt anger rise through the network. Not her anger alone, but the combined fury of 300 soldiers who had sworn to protect those who could not protect themselves. "The killed scholars," said quietly. "They killed healers. They attacked a peaceful station without warning or mercy." The anger grew hotter. "We owe the debt. We owe everyone on that station a debt. Today we pay it." His voice hardened into steel. "No mercy for the enemy, no retreat, no surrender. We go down there and we do what we do best." "HFY." The shout came from 300 throats simultaneously, a wall of sound that shook the drop bay. The hammer of soul opened fire. Its main weapons lit up the void, sending beams of destructive energy toward the battle groups. At the same time, its belly opened, and 300 drop pods launched into the darkness. Felt the acceleration press her into her seat. The pod rotated, oriented itself, and then began to fall. Through her helmet's display, she could see the planet below, growing larger with every second. She could see the station, a tiny dot surrounded by enemy positions. She could see the flashes of weapons fire as they tried to shoot them down. They missed. The pods were too fast, too small, their trajectories too random. The targeting computers could not keep up. The atmosphere hit like a wall of fire. Pod glowed red, then orange, then white. The heat would have killed anyone not protected by shock trooper armor. She felt it through the metal, a warmth that reminded her she was still alive. Below on the station walls, Commander looked up at the sky. What she saw took her breath away. 300 streaks of light cut through the clouds. They looked like shooting stars, like meteors, like the anger of heaven itself falling upon the enemy. They were beautiful and terrible at the same time. The soldiers saw them too. Some tried to run. Some tried to hide. Most just stared in confusion, not understanding what was happening until it was far too late. The first pod hit the ground. It struck the forward command post at a speed that should have been impossible. The impact crater was 20 meters wide. Debris flew in every direction. Soldiers who had been standing nearby were thrown through the air like toys. And then something climbed out of the crater. Landed half a kilometer away, her pod digging a furrow through the enemy camp. She was moving before the dust settled, her already firing. The weapon made a sound like thunder, and each shot punched through armor like paper. Through the neural link, she could see what her saw. Had landed directly on an enemy vehicle and was tearing it apart with his bare hands. Had found a group of enemy officers and was moving through them like a ghost, his blade flashing in the firelight. All around her, shock troops were emerging from craters and impact sites. 300 soldiers scattered across the enemy positions, each one an army of one. They did not form up into neat formations. They did not wait for orders. They simply attacked, moving with a coordination that no other species could match. They had expected many things. They had expected a siege. They had expected a slow, grinding battle. They had expected victory. They had not expected this. And now it was too late to expect anything at all. Commander had seen many battles in her career. She had fought pirates in the outer systems. She had defended outposts against raiders. She had watched soldiers die and watched them kill. She thought she understood war. She was wrong. What was happening below the station walls was not war as she knew it. It was something else entirely. It was destruction given human form. The shock troops moved through the army like fire through a forest. They did not fight the way normal soldiers fought. There were no defensive positions, no careful advances, no trading of fire from cover. There was only attack, constant, relentless, overwhelming attack. Major had landed in the center of the enemy command post. His armor was scorched black from the atmospheric entry, still smoking from the heat. His external speakers activated, and his voice boomed across the battlefield like the voice of an angry god. Attention, VETH Dominion forces. You have attacked a protected installation of the Galactic Coalition. You have 30 seconds to surrender. This is your only warning. For a moment there was silence. The soldiers stared at the giant in black armor who had fallen from the sky. Their officers shouted orders. Their weapons charged. They opened fire. It was the last mistake many of them would ever make. Moved, one moment he was standing still. The next moment he was among them, his weapons firing, his armored fists striking. Soldiers flew through the air, vehicles exploded, bunkers collapsed. He was not fighting them, he was dismantling them. And he was just one of 300. Private sprinted through a trench, her singing its deadly song. The weapon fired magnetically accelerated rounds that traveled faster than the eye could see. Each shot punched through armor, through walls, through anything in its path. Through the neural link she could feel her. She knew where they were, what they saw, what they planned. When Sergeant spotted a group of enemies flanking her position, she knew instantly. She turned and fired before they even realized they had been seen. Contact right 30 meters, thought came through the link. I see them, responded without speaking. She vaulted over a barrier and landed among a squad of soldiers. They were taller than her, even in her armor. They had weapons that would have killed a normal human. It did not matter. She moved like water, like wind, like death itself. Her training took over, her body responding to threats before her conscious mind could even register them. One enemy raised his weapon. She grabbed it, twisted, and used his own body as a shield against the others. Another tried to run. Her caught him before he took 3 steps. 5 seconds, 8 enemies all down. Moving to Sector 7, she reported through the link. Around her she could feel hundreds of similar reports. The shock troops were everywhere at once, hitting them from every direction. The enemy army was fragmenting, breaking apart under the pressure. On the station walls, the coalition defenders watched in stunned silence. The diplomats had stopped clicking their mandibles. The skin flickered wildly with emotions they could not name. Even the massive commander stood perfectly still, his stone face unreadable. They move as one, Delegate Myra whispered. Her empathic senses were overwhelmed by what she felt from the shock troops. It was not bloodlust or hatred. It was something far more frightening. It was pure, focused purpose. 300 minds working together like parts of a single machine. I told you, said quietly. She stood beside, watching the battle unfold. This is what humans can become when we stop holding back. Below, the commander was screaming into his communicator. His perfect siege had collapsed in minutes. His soldiers were dying by the hundreds. His battle groups in orbit had been destroyed by a single ship. Fall back, he ordered. All units fall back to the secondary line. But there was no secondary line. The shock troops had already torn through it. There was no tertiary line either. There was only chaos, destruction, and the endless thunder of human weapons. Watched on his tactical display as his forces melted away. 12,000 soldiers, veterans of a dozen campaigns, were being slaughtered by 300 enemies. It was impossible. It was unfair. It was happening anyway. Sergeant found the commander's bunker. It was heavily fortified, built to survive orbital bombardment. The walls were 3 meters thick. The door was reinforced with alloys that could stop plasma fire. Walked up to the door and knocked. The sound was almost polite, a simple knock, metal on metal. Inside, and his officers stared at the door in confusion. Then's armored fist came through it like it was made of paper. "Surrender is still an option," said conversationally as he tore the door off its hinges. "One-time offer." Reached for his sidearm, moved faster. The fight, such as it was, lasted less than 2 seconds. Back on the walls, checked her tactical display. The red dots that had covered the screen were vanishing at an incredible rate. The army was not just defeated, it was being erased. 47 minutes, said. His voice was shaking. They have been fighting for 47 minutes. How many enemy casualties? Asked. Approximately 11,000. His voice cracked. We are still counting. 11,000 soldiers killed in less than an hour, by 300 attackers. Looked at the battlefield below. Fires burned everywhere. Vehicles lay in ruins. Enemy soldiers who had tried to surrender were being gathered into groups, guarded by shock troops who seemed almost bored now that the fighting was nearly over. "Humans," said slowly. The commander shook his great stone head. "We thought we knew your kind, we were wrong." "You knew the humans who wanted to be known," replied. "The merchants, the diplomats, the scientists, the ones who smile and shake hands and sign treaties." She watched as a shock trooper dragged a screaming officer out of a collapsed bunker. "The shock troops are the other kind, the kind we hoped you would never have to meet." "Why?" Myra asked. This voice was barely a whisper. "Why would you create such monsters?" Turned to face her. Her expression was calm but serious. "Because there are real monsters in the galaxy," she said. "Species that destroy for pleasure, that enslave for profit, that kill without mercy or reason. They are not the worst of them, not even close." She gestured toward the battlefield. "The shock troops exist because sometimes the only way to protect the innocent is to become more terrible than the guilty." Below, the last pockets of resistance were being eliminated, and her squad had cornered a group of enemy soldiers in a supply depot. They had hostages, civilian workers who had been trapped when the attack began. Through the neural link shared her vision with her. They analyzed the situation in milliseconds. 4 hostages, 12 hostiles, 1 entrance, no clean shots. "I have an angle," thought. "Take it," authorized. Fired through a wall. The round passed within centimeters of a hostage's head and struck the soldier holding her. Before the body hit the ground was through the door, her weapon blazing. The other shock troops followed. 3 seconds later, all 12 were dead. All 4 hostages were alive. "Sector clear," reported. "All sectors clear," responded. "Battle is concluded. Begin cleanup operations." On the walls of station, Commander slowly lowered her binoculars. The siege was over. They were defeated. Against all odds, against all reason, they had survived. And now she understood why the rest of the galaxy whispered about humanity, with something like fear in their voices. The sun rose over station for the first time in 12 days without the sound of weapons fire. Smoke still rose from the battlefield below, but the guns had fallen silent. The siege was over. Commander stood at the main gate as it opened for the first time since the attack began. Beyond it, the landscape was transformed. What had been an enemy army was now a graveyard of twisted metal and broken bodies. Prisoners sat in long lines, their hands bound, their faces showing shock and disbelief. Among them moved the shock troops. Major approached the gate. He had removed his helmet, revealing a face that was surprisingly ordinary. He looked tired. His eyes were the eyes of a man who had seen too much death and carried the weight of it every day. "Commander," he said, saluting. "Major, Earth Shock Infantry Division. I apologize for the delay in our arrival." Returned the salute. She wanted to say something meaningful, something that matched the enormity of what had just happened. But all she could manage was, "Thank you." Nodded, he understood. Some things were too big for words. Behind, the other defenders were emerging from the station. Humans. All the species who had fought and bled together for 11 days. They stared at the shock troops with expressions ranging from awe to fear to something that might have been worship. Delegate Myra walked forward slowly. Her glowing skin had returned to its normal brightness, but it flickered with uncertainty. She stopped in front of and looked up at him. "You crossed 18 days of space in 4 hours," she said. "You defeated 12,000 soldiers with 300. You saved us all." She paused, searching for the right words. How is any of this possible? Considered the question carefully. Around him, his soldiers were tending to the wounded, securing prisoners, and beginning the long process of cleanup. Some of them had removed their helmets, showing faces that were young and old and smooth, male and female. They looked human. They were human. That was what made them so terrifying. "Earth has been preparing for war since before we reached the stars," finally said. "We spent centuries fighting each other. We learned lessons that no other species had to learn. When we finally looked up at the sky, we saw a galaxy full of dangers and decided we would never be victims." "But at what cost?" Myra asked. "I can feel what your soldiers feel, the weight they carry, the things they have seen and done." Was quiet for a long moment. "The cost is high," he admitted. "Every shock trooper volunteers knowing they will never be the same. The modifications to our bodies, the neural link, the training, it changes us. We become weapons. Some of us forget how to be anything else." He looked at his soldier with something like sadness in his eyes. "But when a station full of innocent beings is surrounded by enemies, when scholars and healers pick up weapons to protect others, when the galaxy asks who will help them," he turned back to Myra. "Someone has to answer. Someone has to be willing to pay the price." On the other side of the battlefield, Private was helping load wounded prisoners onto medical transports. Even the deserved treatment for their injuries. That was coalition law, and the shock troops followed the law even when no one was watching. One of the survivors approached her. The small alien had silver fur matted with dried blood, not her own, but from the friends she had tried to save. Her dark eyes were filled with emotions that could not read. "You came for us," they said. Her voice was soft, musical, broken by grief. "My people are not warriors. We are scholars, healers. We are nothing to Earth, nothing to humans. Why did you come?" Removed her helmet. She was young, almost the same age as the in front of her. Her face was tired but gentle. "On Earth," she said quietly, "we have a saying, the strong protect the weak. It is not always true. Our history is full of times when we failed to live up to those words, but it is what we try to be. It is why we exist." She gestured to the other shock troops around them. Some were carrying wounded defenders to medical stations. Others were distributing food and water to exhausted survivors. One massive soldier was carefully helping a limping diplomat find a place to rest. "Every one of us volunteered for this," continued. "We knew what it meant. We knew we might die. We knew we would have to do terrible things to protect others." She looked down at her armored hands, hands that had killed dozens of enemy soldiers in the past hour. "But when we heard that healers were dying to protect their friends, that scholars were fighting soldiers, that good people were about to be massacred, how could we not come?" The reached out and touched his hand. Her species communicated through touch telepathy, sharing emotions and memories directly. What she felt from the young human soldier made her gasp. There was no hatred no bloodlust, no joy in killing. There was only a vast, aching sense of duty and love. Love for people she had never met. Grief for the ones she could not save. Determination to do better next time. "You mourn for us," they whispered, "for beings you never knew." "Of course," said simply, "you are people, that is all that matters." They began to cry, not from fear or sadness, but from something else entirely. She had been prepared to die. She had accepted that the universe was cold and cruel and indifferent. And then humans had fallen from the sky like avenging angels, and now she was alive, and a young soldier was telling her that she mattered simply because she existed. It was almost too much to bear. Nearby, Commander was finalizing the casualty reports with Major. The numbers were staggering. Nearly 12,000 killed or captured, 3 enemy battle groups destroyed, the siege broken in less than an hour. "And your casualties?" asked. 19 dead, replied. His voice was steady, but his eyes showed pain. "We will hold a memorial service tomorrow. They knew the risks. They accepted them." 19 dead out of 300. It was a remarkably low number considering what they had accomplished, but could see that for every death was a wound that would never fully heal. "The Coalition will want to study what happened here," said. "They will want to know how you crossed so much space so quickly. They will want to understand your technology." "They can ask," said. "Earth will decide what to share and what to keep hidden. Some will call you monsters. Some already do." Looked out at the battlefield, at the destruction his soldiers had caused. "We have made peace with that. We would rather be feared than see innocent people die." In the weeks that followed, the Galactic Coalition debated what had happened at Station. Some demanded that Earth share its technology. Others called for the shock troops to be classified as illegal weapons. Many simply wanted to understand. Commander submitted her final report with a single recommendation. It was short and simple, but it captured everything she had witnessed. "Do not make enemies of humanity," she wrote. "They fight like demons, but they fight for angels." The Dominion received the message clearly. The images from Station spread through their military command. They saw what 300 humans had done to 12,000 of their soldiers. They saw the speed, the coordination, the absolute devastation. They never attacked Coalition space again. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, the Hammer of Soul continued its eternal patrol. 300 soldiers sat in its belly, waiting for the next call, the next siege, the next impossible mission. They were shock troops. They were humanity's answer to a hostile universe. And they would always come when called.